right. Thanks, Adam. Well, how's it going, guys?
Pretty good. I may be a little
That's going
nervous.
great.
Is it weird doing a semi podcast with another Justin?
No, that's all right. Especially since I don't do them very much anymore. So this is fun for me.
That's
Plus,
fair. Well,
Justin here has better hair.
Thank you.
Well,
Sure.
this should definitely be a blast. As Adam preceded us by saying the title of our panel, and that's determining the face of every MLB team. And I thought the best way to start would be by defining what face of the franchise means to each of us. Merriam-Webster defines it as a player described as a franchise player or the face of the franchise is the most recognizable player on the team, the one given central attention as the team markets itself to fans. So, Danielle, I'll start with you. What does it mean for a player to be the face of the franchise?
I think you're looking for somebody who's going to draw the crowds in, draw the interest of the fans. But I think it could also be someone who is a leader for the team, someone who inspires his fellow players.
Totally fair. And Justin, how about you?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I just add on two of the biggest things I was looking for when I was going through this is pedigree and tenure. Basically, what do they do on the field and how long have they been doing it?
All right. Well, I feel like we should just hop right into this. We'll be going alphabetically by city name. There will be as little discussion as we possibly can because we have to go through 30 teams in an hour, meaning at the most we have 2 minutes and we're already 12 minutes into the hour. So, or 7 minutes into the hour. I'm looking at the time of the stream. Wow. 10 hours of stream. Anyway, let's just hop right into it. We'll start with the Diamondbacks, and this one's fun because they just made the World Series. Unfortunately, they lost, but I think there's two guys that are up for the running with a couple guys close behind. But Danielle, I'll start with you again. Who to you is the face of the Arizona Diamondbacks?
Okay, part of me wanted to say Jock Peterson because he got smacked by Tommy Pham, just like the Diamondbacks got smacked out of the World Series. But I think it's Corbin Carroll, obviously. Even I know that. And, I still struggle with knowing all the players on each team.
Justin, what about you?
Yeah, it's definitely Corbin Carroll. MVP season or borderline MVP season as a rookie. Can keep it short here.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page. I think Zach Gallen is very close as the best pitcher on the team, one of the best pitchers in baseball. But Corbin Carroll's abilities and just the exciting play that he provides on the field makes him just the guy that you first comes to your mind when you think of the Arizona Diamondbacks. So we'll move on to the Atlanta Braves, one of the best teams in baseball and a team that's completely loaded. But I feel like this is another situation where there's not much conversation as to who the face of the franchise is. I'll go straight to you, Justin. Who's the face of the franchise for the Atlanta Braves?
Yeah, I think it's got to be Ronald Acuna Jr. I mean, coming off of an MVP season, like you said, it's a loaded team, but he manages to stand out even with all the talent around him.
Danielle, what about you?
Agreed.
All right.
He is far and above the one.
Yeah, I agree. Incredible season last year, 40-70, a one-of-a-kind season. You obviously have guys like Spencer Strider there that on any other team might be the face of the franchise, but what Ronald has done throughout his career and especially in the previous season really makes him stand out in a field of all-stars on the Atlanta Braves. We'll move on to an up-and-coming team in the Baltimore Orioles that made the postseason last year. They have a bunch of young guys, so it doesn't really feel like anybody's really solidified themselves there, but one guy sort of does stand out to me, and that's Adley Rutschman, former first overall pick. Just one of the best catchers in baseball, maybe the best catcher in baseball. And he's sort of been the face of this rebuild in general. And I think that's allowed him to take over that standing as the face of the franchise for this team, despite all the young talent surrounding him. Justin, are you in agreement there?
Yeah, for sure. He's probably their most marketable player. If you haven't seen the video of Rutsch playing with dogs at Camden Yards, go look it up after the panel. Or if you're in PL Plus, I'll post a link there because he's just the face of the team.
Most of the time you would think that I would agree with you guys, but Justin really wanted me to say Cedric Mullins. Of course, I think we all know his obsession with Mullins, but I'm gonna go a little differently, and I'm gonna say Gunnar Henderson, only because we saw him at a game where they played against the Giants last year. Justin got to go up and meet him and take a picture, and after that, the second half of his season was significantly different. So he got the Mason bump. So I'm gonna go with him.
Wow. Yeah. Did not see that coming, to be completely honest. I have a rundown here. This is one of the few teams where I just have one front runner because I didn't think there was anybody that would actually overtake Adley Rutschman, but that's a fair argument. Having that personal touch really is what makes this conversation unique. So we can move on to another AL East team, and that's the Boston Red Sox. This is a very similar situation where I don't think the conversation is too crazy. I'm going to start with you, Danielle. Who do you think is the face of the franchise for the Boston Red Sox?
I was going to go with Devers. I think that he is the one that stands out for me.
Justin?
Yeah, I think the future is starting to get a bit brighter in Boston, but Devers definitely stands out on this team.
Yeah, I feel like he's the only guy. You look at the other options, Tristan Cassis, Yoshida, Story, Giolito, and Jansen. None of them have really been with the team long enough to set themselves up to be the face of the franchise or have had the performances that Devers has had over the past few years to be the face of the franchise. And then with Devers signing that massive extension, it's like he's going to be the guy for many years to come. And he might not really have much competition as the years go on. But yeah, I think Rafael Devers is the guy that comes to mind when you think of the Cubs. When you think of the Red Sox. Moving on to the Cubs, this one I think is actually really hard considering that the player that we would likely say was their best player last season is a free agent. And we're not going to consider him. That would be Cody Bellinger in this case. We're going to consider what their active roster looks like. So I think that makes this conversation really hard because there are so many options and nobody really stands out. And they don't really have that true superstar that makes themselves the face of this franchise. So Justin, who did you decide was the face of the franchise for the Chicago Cubs?
I decided to go with Dansby Swanson. Danielle talked about leadership earlier, and when I think about leadership on this team, both on and off the field, Dansby Swanson stands out. He's beloved by fans. Maybe there's a bit of dynasty bias for me with him being on several of my dynasty teams, but it's Dansby Swanson for me.
Danielle, what about you?
I really had to be careful to not just choose players because I had them on previous fantasy teams. So, you know what? I'm, again, going to go in a different direction. I wanted to reach out to the greatest Cubs fan I know, which, of course, is Sarah Sanchez, to get her opinion on who is the face of her beloved team. So, and I'm going to really briefly just read for you guys the response that I received. Well, part of the response, because let me tell you, there was a lot. She definitely had a lot of input, but ultimately, she said that maybe Jed is the face of the franchise because he did this to us and none of the players qualify. This is the GD Cubs, Jed. No one wants you to run the Rays. So I'm going to go with Jed.
Wow, that's not an answer I saw coming. I thought we were going to stick to players, but you know what? There were no rules or really restrictions here, so that's totally fair.
It was just too perfect.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to agree with Justin. Despite just 1 year with the Cubs, Dansby Swanson appears to be the guy that is the face of the franchise right now, where you have guys like Ian Happ who have been with the team longer than anybody. And you have somebody like Nico Horner, who's very underrated. And while I think he does have maybe a chance to be the best player on the team, there is that lesser known vibe with him that, the larger landscape of sports and baseball in general. I don't think Nico Horner is a name that people know in general. And Dansby Swanson is somebody that they know. I think Justin Steele has a chance of making himself the face of the franchise in 2024. And there are some other names, especially Imanaga after his press conference when he got signed. I think that guy's got the ability to do that as well. But right now it's Dansby Swanson. We'll stay in the Windy City and move to the South Side as we look at the Chicago White Sox, a team what's the opposite of on the rise, on the fall. They have an interesting team, and I think the case is pretty clear here. For me, the face of the Chicago White Sox is Luis Robert Jr. He finally had a fully healthy season, and he seems to have been the guy for a long time that we expected to be the best player on this team. And last year he finally did that. I think there's a case for other guys in the rotation, but to me, Luis Robert Jr. is the guy that I think of when I think of the Chicago White Sox. Justin, how about you?
Yeah, I'd agree. And I'd just add, he's also just a very big personality too. Someone that is just very likable and seems to be very well loved on that team and by fans.
This is my homer pick. So again, moving in a different direction. And this is my wish kind of pick where the likelihood is low, but it's what I would like to see. And so I'm going to say Andrew Vaughn. And by homer pick, I mean, because he went to the high school that's down the street from our house.
Yep.
So he's from our area. I actually work with his dad. So I've heard a lot about how hard he's worked. To get to Major League Baseball. And I'm really hopeful for him that, he's able to reach that full potential.
Yeah, I've been rooting for him for a long time. Former Golden Bear. My family's a Cal family. So Andrew Vaughn's definitely a guy that I've been rooting for and hoping for that big breakout for a long time, but it is yet to come. Maybe 2024 is the year. We'll move on to the Cincinnati Reds. They feel sort of similar to the Baltimore Orioles, but sort of with, I don't know, like more excitement. Their players are in some cases more electric. I don't know. I think they play with just a different sort of aura. They have that vibe that makes the team more exciting. Clearly not as good as the Orioles, but they have that young team of exciting players. I'll go right to you, Danielle. Who is the face of the franchise for the Cincinnati Reds?
For me, it's De La Cruz. It was so much fun. He is just electric when you watch him, watching the highlights. And I think that he is just a player that can really excite the crowd, excite the fans, and really bring them in to see the games.
Justin?
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, there was one name on everybody's mind last year when we were talking about the Reds, and that was Elly De La Cruz before he'd even come up.
I agree. Yeah, he was just so electric and exciting to watch last year that it really makes him stand out on that team. He looked really good in the Reds uniforms as well. It really fits him really well. And I think Hunter Green is up there. He just hasn't had that true ace level season that I think would take him to that level. But it'll be really exciting to see that battle for face of the franchise in 2024. We'll move on to the Cleveland Guardians. And this one I think is interesting because I think there's a right answer, but there are cases to be made for basically everybody in the sort of upper echelon of this team. Justin, I'll start with you. Who is the face of the franchise for the Cleveland Guardians?
So for me, it's got to be the player that I've been craving for my Blue Jays to trade for all off season, Jose Ramirez. Like you said, there are several players that do stand out here, but sort of like with the Atlanta Braves, he seems to stand out even with a team full of loaded players.
Danielle?
Agreed. And for me, there are certain players who you really get a sense that they have a love of the game. And that to me is something that I want to see in, the players that I'm rooting for, that they're actually passionate about the game itself. So, and that comes across with him.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement here, which is interesting considering that there are guys like Shane Bieber, who's won a Cy Young, and Emmanuel Clase, who's one of the fire-breathing closers, one of the best in baseball. But Jose Ramirez, with his personality, really stands out. What I think took him, what I think allowed him to take this title and run with it was knocking out Tim Anderson. That was pretty awesome. We'll go to the Colorado Rockies, a fun team. We'll let them have that. This is they've got some guys here. They have the guys that they signed to the big contracts. They've got the young guns that are coming up and sort of making themselves known here. And then they got the guys that have been around for a long time. And I think the fact that there's a that's a bobblehead of the guy that I'm going to choose. Charlie Blackmon, I think, is the face of the franchise. He is the most marketable player. He's been there for so long. He's not at his peak anymore, obviously, but it's sort of like Joey Votto. He's not at the same level as Joey Votto, but the way that Joey Votto has been in recent years, where it's like he's not at his peak, but he is the guy you think of when you think of the Reds. Charlie Blackmon is the guy that I think of when I think of the Rockies, and he just has that personality that I think fits this team a lot. Justin, are you in agreement here?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree. I think for some people, he may have become a bit of a more boring option for fantasy, but when you look at real life and what this team's doing on the field, it's got to be Charlie Blackmon.
Danielle?
I mean, he is the obvious choice. The other good choice, of course, is Chris Bryant, because why do you get a guy like him on your team with those eyes and that face and not want to put him up on poster boards and out on ads and in front of the stadium? So, you know, I think there's also a good argument to be made for Chris Bryant. I know, because the Giants had him for a little while and I was mesmerized.
Yeah, I think I saw a stat that he had more home runs during his half season with the Giants than he's had in the past 2 years with the Rockies.
He should have never left us. I said the same about other boyfriends and stuff, but he really should have never left us.
Yeah. And I do think Nolan Jones has the chance to overtake that role as well, because of the level that he played at last season. He was really good, and there's not many people that can lay claim to a season like that in Colorado. But we'll move on to the Detroit Tigers. This is another young team on the rise with not many huge players that you really think of as superstars. Danielle, I'll start with you. Who is the face of the franchise for the Detroit Tigers?
I don't know if I'm the person to ask for here, because the face of the Detroit Tigers for me will always be Pablo Sandoval. So shout out to Paul Sporer.
Because of his performance in the World Series?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I could come up with nothing else.
All right.
I was just too overjoyed by that one.
That's crazy. Justin?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm going to have to go with Spencer Torkelson. Detroit is definitely having a little bit of turnover. They just lost to, I would have considered their face of their franchise, Miguel Cabrera, but I think Torkelson, when I look at this young team, he's the player that stands out above the rest that I think is going to be the most marketable.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to go with Torkelson here. It's mostly because he was a first overall pick, and he actually did sort of break out in the second half of last season. And while I don't think he's like the best player by WAR on the team, he is the guy that you sort of think of when you think of this rebuild. Tarek Skubal, I feel like, is going to steal that role of face of the franchise in 2024. Just his incredible comeback in the second half last year from Tommy John surgery was super incredible. I actually just read an article where he was one of the main characters. So go check that out. Plug pitcherlist.com. But yeah, Tarek Skubal, I think, is there, but Spencer Torkelson is the face of the franchise right now. And now we'll go to one that I think is honestly the most interesting discussion to have, and that's the Houston Astros. They just have so many big names, big personalities. They have been in so many news stories the past few years, ever since the sign stealing scandal, the banging scheme, whatever you want to call it. And that has elevated them into a status of villains, but also has allowed them to overtake the landscape of sort of the media in baseball. And so there's plenty of guys here. Justin, I assume that you took a while to come up with this one, or was this one easy for you? Who's the face of the franchise for the Houston Astros?
Yeah, I think this might have been the hardest one out of all of them for me, because like you said, there are so many candidates, and I think it's maybe a little bit tighter than some of the other teams that have multiple guys. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I would have to go with Jose Altuve, just because of what I said before about that combination of pedigree and tenure. You know, Kyle Tucker and Jordan Alvarez, I think, are going to run away with that in the future. We might start seeing some decline from Altuve, unfortunately, soon. But at least for now, going into the season, I think he's still the face of that franchise.
What about you, Danielle?
Yeah, Altuve is definitely the face of the franchise. I think that, an argument could be made for Chas McCormick, my favorite accountant slash scientist. He does so much during the season, especially around April. And was number 5 on the MLB Network's left fielder list. So, and I don't know if anybody else has ever seen his little picture. He looks like he could be, someone working for NASA in the 1950s, or, someone in your accountant's office when you go in for tax season.
Yeah, we've all seen his picture. It's great. It is great. I think I'm also going to agree with Jose Altuve. He is sort of been the face of that team for a long time, former MVP, incredible in the postseason. But the cases for Yordan Alvarez, Alex Bregman, and I think especially Justin Verlander are super strong, just considering Justin Verlander has been with the team for a few years, left, and then just came right back. And is very outspoken. I think he's in the media a lot. And I think there's a case for all of these guys to have, but Altuve is the one that stands out slightly above the rest of them. We'll move on to the Kansas City Royals. And this is a conversation of, newcomers and mainstays, in that I think Salvador Perez has a very good case to be the guy because he's been the guy for a long time. He was there when they won the World Series, but you then have this super bright, almost volcanic superstar coming up and going to have his 3rd season in 2024, and that's Bobby Witt Jr. I think he overtook the face of the franchise this past season. I think Bobby Witt Jr. is now the face of the franchise here. And it had been Salvador Perez for a long time, but with Witt's ascension into superstardom, I think he's the guy now. Danielle, what do you think?
For me, I chose for this to be my suck up pick because I want to continue being invited back to PitchCon. So I was going to go with Cole Reagans, just to make Nick happy. But I also think, there is that, you've got the old guard, and then you've got some of the exciting new players. So as much as I think that longevity with a team is important, I also think that the new players sometimes can really entice the fan base to rally around them.
Yeah. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'd have to go with Salvador Perez, actually. I debated back and forth on this for quite a bit. There's no denying the talent of Bobby Witt Jr. I'm certainly not going to deny him anything, but Perez has just been the face of the franchise, like you said, for so long. He was there when they won that World Series, which as a Blue Jays fan, I'm still not thrilled about. But I think it's still got to be Perez, at least for one more year, like I was saying with Altuve. And then we can see what these young guys do in the future. But that consistency, I think, really just goes the extra distance for me.
Totally fair. That's crazy that we've gone through so many teams already, and this is the first one where there has been zero consensus. We all had different picks for different reasons, and I think that's super fair, and that's why this discussion is so fun and different. We'll move on to the Los Angeles Angels, which I feel like there is no conversation here. Danielle, I'll go to you. I'll let you have this one.
So it's because their face is just an angel weeping now that Shohei is gone, right?
Gosh.
Like we all agree that that's the face.
I don't want to talk about that guy anymore.
Well, then the next team is going to be really rough for you.
Yes.
So for me, you know what? I'm actually not too certain of who stands out now with him gone. Who's in that shadow coming up?
Are you? Is that a joke?
No, I just really want to stick with my angel weeping.
Okay. Justin, how about you?
Yeah, I think with Ohtani gone, it's just got to be Mike Trout. I mean, we've seen the conversations recently that Anthony Rendon doesn't even like baseball. So I think there's really no one else on this team that can come close. It's Mike Trout all the way.
Yeah, it was Mike Trout for a very long time, and there was definitely a conversation to be had over the past couple of years with Shohei Ohtani basically looking like the best player of all time and being the most recognizable face on that team, not just on the team, but in all of baseball, and going up there in terms of the leaderboards in all of sports. So Mike Trout now can lay claim to that once again. He'll probably have that for the rest of his career. I don't see anyone overtaking him as long as he is in the red and white. But yeah, Mike Trout, face of the Los Angeles Angels, now go to Hollywood, to the Los Angeles Dodgers. I'll turn it over to you, Justin. This is going to be a hard one for Giants fans like me and Danielle.
Yeah, I think this one might be a bit of controversial, but I'm going to go with Mookie Betts. He may not be the best player on the team now with Freddie Freeman and Shohei Ohtani there, but Shohei Ohtani just got there. Freddie Freeman's only been there for a little bit. I think I have to go with the guy who is the veteran with this franchise. And Mookie Betts is just very, again, with all the talent on this team, he's become very underrated for what he contributes to the Dodgers.
Yeah, super marketable as well. Danielle, I've been enjoying plenty of your joke answers, and I really hope you have a good one here.
Well, I'm sorry, not necessarily, but you know what, Mookie Betts, even as a Giants fan, I do like him, not only, for being a good player, but just really seems like a great guy. So I do think that that's a good pick, but I think it's got to be Shohei, because not only is he looking like the face of the Dodgers, but the legs, the arms, the back, with how much they paid him, he is everything. And, it feels like he's really even being pushed for the face of MLB. So for me, that's an obvious choice.
Yeah, I definitely think he is the face of MLB. It's hard to choose him, though, because he has yet to don a uniform on a baseball field for the team, yet I still feel inclined to pick him. The conversation is super interesting, though, because you have Mookie Betts, who is maybe a top 5 player in baseball and has been for many years and has been with the Dodgers for the last few years. And it's hard. It's a very difficult conversation to have, just because there is so much nuance with this conversation as well in terms of face of the franchise. I'm going to go with Ohtani, mostly because of the point that Danielle made, that Ohtani to me is the face of MLB. So how could he not be the face of his own team? I'll do that. But I also say the face of the Dodgers is probably deferrals of some sort.
Yeah, look at the apparel sales after, the deal was made. Right. I mean, there's just a lot going on around him. And I think that you're looking for not only who's going to get you to the World Series, who's going to help you win those championships, but also who's going to get butts in seats. And I think that he does that. I think even people just going to visit LA, maybe meaning to go to Disneyland, are going to want to try and go to a game just to be able to say that they saw him play.
It might be disappointing because isn't Disneyland a lot closer to the Angels Stadium?
It might be, but
I don't know. I've been to Disneyland once in the last 15 years. I cannot remember. We can move on to the Miami Marlins, and I don't know. They had the batting title winner last year. Their best starter is now out with Tommy John surgery, but they did have the cover athlete for MLB The Show 23, and currently for the next 3 more days, he's the standing cover athlete. They're making an announcement on the 30th to announce the cover athlete for 2024. So as it currently stands, Jazz Chisholm is the face of MLB The Show, and I think that makes him the face of the Miami Marlins. He's just a guy with a massive personality. I think he draws plenty of eyes and fans on the field when he's healthy. Doesn't really have the best numbers on his team, but I think with the vibe that he brings, it's unmatched. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if this is cheating or not, but I think I'm going to go with Sandy Alcantara. I know he's not going to play a game in 2024, but I think he's by far the best player on this team, or at least at the moment. And he's the face of the franchise. He's such a big personality, like you've talked about with some of these other players. I don't know if people have seen when Yuri Perez got called up, the way that, the two of them interacted with each other. I know it may be a hot take because he's not playing this year, but it's got to be Alcantara for me.
All right, Danielle?
I went with Jazz because I think he's one of those fun and exciting players to watch, and that he really lights up the fans when he's out there. So...
yeah, totally agree. Really fun. And now he's in center field, so he can make even more highlight plays to get him in the baseball media sphere. We'll move on to the Milwaukee Brewers. And this is another interesting conversation where you have a clear trio of frontrunners that have their own case to be made. I'll turn it right over to you, Justin. Who is the face of the Milwaukee Brewers?
Yeah, for me, I mean, Danielle, you went with Chris Bryant earlier as your baseball crush. I'm going to have to go with Christian Yelich here as mine. Just another player that you can just get absolutely lost in those eyes. And I know, with Corbin Burns there, he may not be the best player on this team, but he's certainly the most marketable and just a fun guy on and off the field.
Yeah, fair points. Danielle?
Yeah, I agree. I think that he draws people in absolutely with, you got to have the eyes, and then, he's got the prowess out on the field. So I think that he's a great pick.
Yeah, I'm going to agree there, but I do think it's really close. Christian Yelich does have that MVP under his name, and I think that's what pulls him apart. And he also sort of did the like media tournament where he just went to all the late night shows and was just like hanging out with Pete Davidson. He's done it all. And I think he's very well liked by players and fans alike. Corbin Burns is probably the best player on that team. And Devin Williams, I think, is one of the most well-known players among, I guess we're all nerds, amongst baseball nerds, just because how many people have a signature pitch that has a name like that? What, him and Alex Cobb?
Yeah.
The thing. Devin Williams Airbender is definitely something that makes him stand out, but Christian Yelich is the face of the Milwaukee Brewers, and that's a consensus pick there. We'll move on to the Twins, and this one's super interesting to me because I think there's plenty of cases to be made, and none of them I feel like are right. I feel like there's no consensus face of this team, but Danielle, who is the face of the Minnesota Twins?
I was going to go with Carlos Correa. So, and that's not a dig at what happened, a short while ago, but I think that Carlos Correa has a good case for being the face of that team.
All right, Justin?
For me, it's going to have to be Byron Buxton. I mean, I know he doesn't maybe stand out as much as some of the other players that we've mentioned because of the injuries, but we can only imagine what a healthy Byron Buxton would have looked like if he had played more games than he has so far. I think we're looking at a very obvious face of the franchise here.
Yeah, I was under the same impression for a little bit just because Byron Buxton was that guy, but he just doesn't ever play. And last year was a very below average season for his standards. Carlos Correa does have the biggest contract on that team, so that makes him super interesting. And even Royce Lewis, I think, is going to be the face of the franchise after 2024. But to me right now, it's Pablo Lopez. And maybe that's a pitcher list bias because he is one of the site's good friends, one of Nick's best friends amongst the player group. And I think he's a very likable guy. He's not super outspoken, but what he does on the field, I think, speaks for itself. And just, an incredible pitcher, and really took his game to another level last year. And seeing him pitch in the postseason last year and have that moment with Johan Santana on the mound in the playoffs, that was super awesome. And so to me, it's Pablo Lopez. We'll see how that plays out in 2024. That'll be one of the most interesting face of the franchise races to watch. Now we'll head to Queens with the New York Mets as I think we have one that's somewhat confusing because it depends on how you define face of the franchise here. To me, I don't know. It's like you have Francisco Lindor. He's like the guy with the smile. He's the most exciting one. But you have Pete Alonso, who's very outspoken, is the home run derby guy. He's been with the team longer than Lindor. And then you have Edwin Diaz, who has the trumpet intro, and is maybe the clear-cut best reliever in baseball, despite not even pitching in 2023. I think when I think of the Mets, I think of Pete Alonso. But does that make him the face of the franchise? While I consider further, Justin, who did you decide on?
Yeah, this is a closer one than I thought it would be at first, but I'm actually going to go with Edwin Diaz because for me, it's got to be the player that hurt himself last year while celebrating. He's such a big personality. He's such a dominant player on the field. There's just no question to me that Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor definitely deserve their due. But when I think of the Mets, I think of Edwin Diaz.
Danielle?
I went with Lindor. I think that for me, he's got that combination of being a great player, an attractive player, an affable player. I was actually looking up pictures of each player last night to, balance things out between quality on the field and attractiveness just for my own entertainment. He looks like a gladiator out there sometimes. There was this one picture and it really made me think of Russell Crowe out there saying, are you not entertained? And Lindor just had kind of that look about him. And that to me is somebody that should be the face of a team.
Yeah, I think both of those cases are fair. And I really want to lean with Pete Alonso because he's the guy that I think of when I think of the Mets. But just the intro with the trumpets for Edwin Diaz, I think takes the cake. He's popularized that, or maybe repopularized what was once popularized by the closers of the early 2000s and late 90s, especially with Mariano Rivera and Enter Sandman. We're bringing it back. We're bringing back the closer entrances. And I think Edwin Diaz is the key guy in that movement. And for me, he's the face of the New York Mets. And I think it'll only grow in 2024, especially if they bring back Timmy Trumpet and whatever that song is called. We'll move on to the Bronx with the New York Yankees. And there's a lot of stars here, and then there's a lot of guys who aren't stars, but I think the trio of stars they have stand out a lot. Danielle, who is the face of the New York Yankees at the moment?
For me, it's got to be Aaron Judge. I think that if it wasn't for Shohei, Aaron Judge would be the face of the Yankees and the face of MLB. I think he would be the one that honor would go to. So that's who stands out.
That's totally fair. Justin?
Yeah, I would just add on that, it's definitely got to be Aaron Judge. And I think, now that Shohei Ohtani's in the National League, I think he's going to rack up quite a few more MVPs because the fact that he's a player that can compete with somebody who can both pitch and hit for MVP, that tells you how unique Judge is as a talent and just also a great guy from everything I've seen as well.
Yeah, he seems like a great guy. I'm still upset that his brother Arson didn't sign with the Giants, but that's old news at this point. But yeah, those are totally fair points. I think the MVP voters got it wrong, and Shohei should have won the MVP that year, but 62 home runs is 62 home runs. I think Aaron Judge is the face of the Yankees, but Garrett Cole has a case being the best pitcher in the American League last year, and Juan Soto is one of the faces of baseball. And I think he's right up there with both of them. It's crazy considering that they have these three guys that if you're making a list of the, top 10 faces of MLB, I think all three of these guys have the ability to be in that conversation. And it's crazy to have all three of those guys on one team. We'll go from a team that has that many guys that are in the running for face of MLB to the Oakland Athletics, a team that has betrayed me as they plan on moving to Las Vegas. This was probably the team that I've been to most games for. Now they are almost without any stars anymore. It's a little disappointing, but they do have some interesting guys. Zach Geloff was really good in the second half last year. I don't think he's the face of the franchise because I don't know anything about him. He's been there for a few months, and while he was good then and was a top prospect, he's not the guy I think of. And even Esteury Ruiz is sort of in that same boat where he's really fast, but he doesn't do anything else. And I don't know anything about his personality. Brent Rooker, however, all-star and hit 30 home runs last year and became a superstar on Twitter this offseason as just started tweeting some great stuff. And I think he seemed like a really genuine and nice guy on there as well. And that really enamored me with him. And it was really endearing to see him be so personable on Twitter. And I think that's all it took for me to name Brent Rooker as the face of the Oakland Athletics. Danielle, where are you at with the A's?
I am in complete agreement. That is who I put. And I said he's hilarious on Twitter. Mm-hmm. He has been one of my favorite follows in the last year. I really enjoy the content that he's putting out. Both funny, he's entertaining, but also informative in a lot of ways to help see things from a different perspective. So I think he's a great face for a team that has a lot of chaos going on.
Yeah. Justin?
Yeah, for me, I went to a slightly different direction. I had to go with Mason Miller. When I think about the player that is going to give Oakland A's fans, all three of them, the most hope, to me, that's Mason Miller. And I think when you go there and actually think from the perspective of the fan base, who would be the most recognizable name to people that don't necessarily care as much about baseball as we do, I think Mason Miller is probably the one making highlight reels and, attracting new Oakland A's fans that, will hopefully follow the team to Vegas.
Yeah, that's we'll see if he stays healthy and what his role is in 2024, because it sounds like he may be out of the bullpen, out of the rotation. I don't know. He's going to be like Jordan Hicks in some ways. We'll see how that works out. We'll move to the Philadelphia Phillies, one of the most exciting teams in baseball. And I'm just going to send it right back to you, Justin. Who is the face of the Philadelphia Phillies?
Okay, so people that know me know I am not shy about a hot take. I'm going to have to go with Aaron Nola here for the simple reason that I'm not sure what kind of seasons we're going to get out of some of these other superstars with Zach Wheeler and Bryce Harper and Trey Turner. And maybe at the end of this year, I'll look like a fool for saying this, but I'm a little bit worried about those guys and some of the decline we might see. They're still star players, there's no doubt, but I'm just a little bit worried. I mentioned earlier how important consistency is. I know Nick preaches it all the time. Aaron Nola is one of the most consistent pitchers in all of baseball. He may not be as elite as some of the other guys we like to talk about, but he's just consistent every single year. So for me, it's going to be Aaron Nola.
Fair. Danielle, what about you?
I forgot to bring my 2015 body issue from Sports Illustrated in to show you who my pick is for this one. But it's absolutely Bryce Harper. I think Bryce Harper is somebody who appeals to everyone. He's, an incredible superstar. He's a fantastic competitor. And he looks like he could be on the cover of one of my romance books. So I think he has the full spectrum, and that he will always have my vote.
Yeah, and I think friend of Pitcher List, Ellen Adair, would probably agree with Justin, but I'm going to agree with Danielle. Bryce Harper was probably the most recognizable player in baseball before Shohei Ohtani rose to fame in LA, and I think he has maintained that just because of his postseason heroics with the Phillies, a really exciting team. And while I wouldn't say he's like too crazy off the field in terms of like charisma or being outspoken. He obviously does have the clown question meme. But when he's on the field, he plays with so much heart and hustle, and he's just a super exciting and clutch player. And his numbers back up the sort of confidence that he plays with.
He's got that passion for the game that we love.
Yes, exactly. We'll go over to the Pittsburgh Pirates, and this one was also super hard because you have a bunch of younger guys that have not really solidified themselves as stars. Then you have this former superstar and MVP that they brought back in Andrew McCutchen, who was the face of the franchise for so long, but then left. I mean, probably not because of him. It was likely the Pirates being stingy, but now that he's back with the team, it's like, does he just get to take that back? Is that how that works? Does he just take back the face of the franchise after being gone for so long? Or do these guys that have sort of grown up with the team over the past couple of years, like O'Neal Cruz, who missed most of last year, Brian Reynolds, who's been one of their most consistent players, Brian Hayes, who finally seems to be breaking out, and David Bednar, who is one of the best closers in baseball. But I think the fact that none of these other guys have really taken the full step to superstardom allows Kutch to still be the face of the franchise for that team, despite the multi-year absence in between his first and second stints with the Pirates. Danielle, what do you think?
Okay, Brian Reynolds looks like he could be a Pirate. He looks like he could play the role of a Pirate. So, I was considering him. But, and again, somebody who played for the Giants for a little while, I really love Andrew McCutchen. There is
Great
just
guy.
something really steady about him. He's got a great sense of humor, can really poke fun. He's still somebody who has a genuine love for the game. And I think that there's something to be said about the leadership qualities somebody like him can bring to a clubhouse and how he can represent the team. So he's my pick.
Justin?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I think Andrew McCutchen is maybe one of the most likable players in all of baseball. And that's really saying something with some of the talent we have in the league right now. I think he does just step right back into the role as the face of the franchise, especially because I don't think anyone really ever took that role away when he wasn't with the Pirates.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'd be remiss, though, if I didn't mention my guy, Jack Sawinski here. I think in year 3, he's someone to keep an eye on because this team doesn't have a lot of bright spots on it, so keep an eye on what he can do.
Yeah, totally fair. Yeah, I feel like McCutchen might be the most likable player for me in recent memory. Like, I've never heard somebody talk bad about Andrew McCutchen, both on the field and off the field. He just does everything. He seems like a super generous guy. He's really funny and just seems super awesome. And then also you just have his Twitter personality, which consists of one word: furries, and that's about it. But yeah, I love Andrew McCutchen. I don't think there's anybody out there that can say otherwise. We'll move on to the San Diego Padres, where they are almost like Astros Junior in that they have a lot of big names, and maybe there's just 2 that stand out amongst the rest. But the Padres are a super interesting situation. Justin, who is the face of the San Diego Padres?
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up the Astros because for me, I'm going to have to go with Manny Machado. Fernando Tatis Jr., I know, is their future and is probably the best player on that team. But we've seen a little bit of immaturity from him as he's been starting his career. Hopefully, he'll come into his own as he continues to grow. But for me, if I'm thinking from the perspective of the marketing department and who I'd like to be putting out there as the face of our franchise, it's going to have to be Manny Machado. And maybe Tatis can take that role away from him, but at least for now, I'm saying Machado.
Danielle, what about you?
I'm going with Tatis. I think he's flashy. I think he's going to be with the team for a while. I think that, when he has a big play, it's going to be on the highlights. People are going to be able to see it and see his enthusiasm for the game. And I think that's a big draw.
Totally fair. I think it's Tatis for me, just because he's been so exciting, despite maybe not having the longevity that Machado has had. Tatis's rise to fame was just so quick and electric that he just became one of the faces of baseball so fast. And then the controversy that came with his injuries and performance enhancing drugs scandal, I think that even shot him up further, which is crazy to say. But I mean, the guy was a cover athlete for MLB The Show and has been super great on the field and just always seems to be in the media. And so for me, Fernando Tatis Jr. is the face of the San Diego Padres. And now we'll move on to the team that is surrounding me in basically all areas of my room and even on my body. This is a Hawaiian Giants shirt, which I love to wear when I get the opportunity, which is not that often. So I took the chance here. I think this one's pretty easy for me. And maybe I should have worn his jersey, but for me, it's Logan Webb. Hometown guy. The guy went to high school with my ex-girlfriend. So I watched him play football when he was in high school. Little did I know he would be the face of my favorite baseball team. I have his jersey. And on top of all of that, his dad, Eric, follows me on Twitter. So, of course, Logan Webb's one of my favorite players and is the face of the San Francisco Giants, which is, I think, not controversial at all because they really have few stars on that team. Danielle, I'm going to you next because I know you're also a Giants fan.
Really? Was it the big orange room that gave it away? All of the bobbleheads up
No,
here?
we went to a game together. That's how I know.
Oh, yes, that's right. You know what? I'm in complete agreement. And for me, I really thought about this. I mean, not only is he at this point the real standout on the Giants, but especially with all of the woes that the Giants have had during the offseason, trying to entice new players over to the team. I've really appreciated how much Logan Webb has spoken out about San Francisco and what the city means to him and how great the city is, because I think there is a lot of misconceptions. As a person who has, grown up in the Bay Area, spent a lot of time, I learned how to drive in San Francisco. that was a frightening prospect. But I think there are a lot of misconceptions out there, and I appreciate the way Logan Webb is standing up for the team, speaking out about it, and trying to do his part to get some new blood into San Francisco.
Justin?
Yeah, I think we can make this one unanimous. It's got to be Logan Webb. I know you have Camilo Doval on this list as well, and I think he's quite underrated and is a player that really deserves to get his due, but Logan Webb is the ace of the team and the face of the franchise.
Yeah, and that's an unbiased decision there. So the consensus is real, and I expect it to be across all Major League Baseball fans. We'll now move over to the Seattle Mariners as we enter the final 5 minutes of our panel. We should be able to knock this out. I think this one's pretty easy. I'll send it right back to you, Justin. Face of the Seattle Mariners.
Yeah, this to me has to be maybe one of the most exciting players and one of the faces of baseball, Julio Rodriguez. It's just simple. We all know what he can do, and the personality he has, how outspoken he is on Twitter, how much he loves the fans. It's Julio Rodriguez.
Danielle?
Yeah, that's probably the smart answer. I was going to go with Kyle Raleigh just because I want to see Big Dumper, put up in advertisements everywhere. One of the big posters or flags outside of the stadium with that splashed across it. I just think would be perfect.
Yeah, I think Fantasy Baseball Sam would probably choose Big Dumper as well. I'm going to go with Julio Rodriguez also because he just is so electric. He got the huge extension as well, and he is just super good and is he just seems like a likable guy. He enjoys the game so much, got a great smile, very good looking, and plays super well in center field for the Mariners, and has sort of been the face of the team's resurgence as they made it back to the postseason and broke their super long postseason streak that may be starting again, but I don't want to jinx them. We can move over to the St. Louis Cardinals. Danielle, who is the face of the St. Louis Cardinals? I feel like there's two choices. So who are you choosing?
You know what? I went with Brendan Donovan. I just thought that he stood out for me. And so that's no, actually I just threw a dart and that's how I picked that one.
Yeah, that's okay. That I didn't even have him in the running. So that's interesting. I'll let you have that one. Justin, what about you?
I'm also going to have to go off board here. I'm going to say Jordan Walker. Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado might be the obvious choices, but I think with the state of the Cardinals right now, those could also be players that may not be here in a year's time and are both definitely, while they might have something left in the tank, they're definitely in decline. So I'm going to have to go with the future of this team, which I think is Jordan Walker.
Nice. Wow. Interesting. Despite Goldschmidt being the guy who won an MVP, I think Arenado is a guy that has been such a big name in baseball throughout his career that he's maintained it. And while his performance expectedly has dropped leaving Colorado, I still think he is the face of the St. Louis Cardinals. He plays with a lot of fire, and he is just so consistent that I think he maintains the title of face of the franchise for the St. Louis Cardinals, but it's totally fair that there are probably other guys that are going to take over Goldie and Arenado as they get older and these other guys enter their primes. We'll now go over to the Tampa Bay Rays, which this question probably would have been a lot more interesting a year ago. We'll avoid that conversation. And we'll just enter right into who the face of the franchise for the Tampa Bay Rays is. Danielle, who do you got?
Randy Arozarena. So that I think, I don't know, that's who stands out the most for me.
Mm-hmm. Justin?
Yeah, I'm going to have to go off board again here and pick another injured pitcher and go with Shane McClanahan. Mm-hmm. Because when I think of this franchise, he is the first player that comes to mind and is probably the most talented player on this team right now.
Yeah, totally fair. I think I probably would have picked him, and I really want to pick Pete Fairbanks as he's my dude as a co-host of a relief pitcher podcast. Pete Fairbanks is one of the guys that I love to mention at least once every podcast just to keep the streak going. But Randy Arozarena is so exciting, and he knows how to have like fun on the field, and he has so many antics and stuff that don't anger fans anymore. Just like in the WBC when he makes those crazy catches and then he crosses his arms like he does in the big highlights. And then also just wearing the cowboy boots at the home run derby. He knows how to create attention and then backs it up with his play on the field. And when I think of Randy Arozarena, I think the first thing I think of is that play in the 2020 World Series where Chris Taylor missed the ball in center field and Randy Rosa made it all the way around third base just to fall, get back up and still score. And just like the image of him like slapping the plate is just ingrained in my mind. That's honestly my favorite play in all of baseball, especially because it happened against the Dodgers, but that's probably a personal thing. We'll go on to the reigning World Series champions, the Texas Rangers. They got two guys here, and I think some other guys made a name for themselves and have made names for themselves across their entire career. But for me, I think it's Corey Seager. He was just so good last year. World Series MVP twice now. Was just so good in the running for MVP throughout the season as well. And despite Marcus Semien having a massive contract, Adolis Garcia having an incredible postseason, and guys like Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom, most likely future Hall of Famers on the team, but injured to start the season, I still think Seager is the guy that you think of when you think of the current iteration of the Texas Rangers. Justin, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, this one's a real coin toss between Marcus Semien and Corey Seager.
Mm-hmm.
If you ask me tomorrow, I might say Corey Seager, but today I'm going to have to go with Marcus Semien. Maybe there's a little bit of Blue Jays bias in there, but he's just such a dominant player, such a likable guy, and we know what he did for the Texas Rangers in the playoffs.
Danielle?
Yeah, same. I just think Semien's a workhorse for the team, and so that's where I leaned.
All right, we are entering the final two. The first one, Toronto Blue Jays. They have a very interesting core of guys, and I think there's one guy that stands out to me, Danielle, who is the face of the Toronto Blue Jays.
Okay, look, I know who stands out, but I will say that, the real answer would be Bo Bichette because I really love watching him play. The not real answer would be that to round out my trifecta of baseball crushes, Kevin Kiermaier, because I've crushed on him for a very, very long time. And
That's
so that for me would be a good face for the Blue Jays.
That's fair. Justin, what about you?
So I'm going to have to cheat slightly here with my hometown team and have two answers because for me, the real answer is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think he's the obvious choice as the face of the franchise. The Jays have to get him locked up at some point soon. But I also have to give a shout out to a different Kevin Gausman, because I can't think of many non-Canadian athletes that have taken to this city and this country as much as him. He's just true blue Canadian now. Through and through, loves this city, loves this country, loves everything about Canadian culture.
Yeah, great answer there. Former Giant as well. So I do favor Gausman a little, but I'm going with Vladdy Jr., Vladito. He has just been an enormous name, not only because his father is a Hall of Famer, but his performances in the minors just made him a star even before he touched a major league field. And then from there, it took him a while to get going, but he had that huge season and hasn't really lived up to that potential that he's shown, that ceiling that he's displayed, but he is still super fun to watch. And he is the player that I think of when I think of the Washington Nationals. Or when I think of the Blue Jays. It's the second time I've done that. We'll move on to the final team, the Washington Nationals. And I do believe that this is the hardest one because I don't know if they have one. It may be Steven Strasburg, who is long gone, technically retired, but is still there. Justin, who is the face of the Washington Nationals?
Oh, gosh. I agonized over this one, too. Can I say Vladimir Guerrero Sr.? Does that count with the Montreal Expos?
Ryan Zimmerman?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if I had to give a serious answer, I think CJ Abrams probably stands out the most as the most talented player and a likable guy as well.
Danielle, what about you?
When I was doing prep, I momentarily forgot that Bryce Harper was no longer on this team. So I had to go back and look and go, Like, I'm very sleep deprived. Okay. It's been a very long time. Nonetheless, look, you know what? I've been married for almost 20 years and occasionally I accidentally use my maiden name. So just weird stuff happens when you're really tired. And instead I just went to the Ouija board and the Ouija board said CJ Abrams because there really is nobody else who I think, pulls into the lead.
Yeah, no, it's a really hard conversation to have because Lane Thomas was pretty solid last year, and so was Keibert Ruiz. And I don't know, like Kyle Finnegan's there, and you've got some starters that are all right. But CJ Abrams was really good in the second half. And I really feel like there is some sort of bias amongst at least us that we're biased towards the fantasy value of players. And Abrams is a guy that's going to be somewhat of a sleeper breakout candidate in 2024 because of his electric second half once he hit the top of the order there. I feel like the correct answer is currently they don't have a face of the franchise, but if we're looking at 2024, I feel like CJ Abrams is going to take the spotlight there and become the face of the franchise. But this is going to be the one answer where it's not like the rest of them. And I think they currently don't have one. So that's my answer there. And that actually wraps up all 30 teams. I don't know. Do we want to pick like a face of the fantasy baseball industry, or is that is that weird to do as members of the industry?
I'm not allowed to do that.
Well, hey, you can do that. You can be biased. You can say it's you.
No, nobody wants this to be the face of the nobody even wants this to be the mind of the fantasy baseball industry. So I would plead the fifth. Okay.
Justin, do you want to answer this question? No.
Oh, it's really hard to pick just for the entire industry, but I think I'd have to go with what the industry is talking about right now and what I'm seeing all over Twitter every day, which is Matt Wallner.
Okay. All right. I will be a suck up and I'll say Nick Pollock is the face of the fantasy baseball industry. But yeah, I mean, that's going to do it for our faces of the franchise. Do you guys want to plug anything while you have all of these eyes on this stream? Justin, do you have anything to plug other than your Twitter at Havelock Justin?
Yeah, I've got some very exciting stuff coming up soon, some of which I can't even talk about yet. So you're just going to have to drop me a follow at Havelock Justin and keep an eye on what's coming soon.
All right. Danielle, anything on your end other than your Twitter at Mrs. D. Salinger?
Yeah, that feral wife. Shout out to RotoWear, who has me outfitted. You guys couldn't see the shirt.
Wow.
Kenny was nice enough to send us some warm clothes since I'm out here in the freezing office. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can hear me talking about fantasy baseball, all sorts of other things, harassing my husband, lately bagging on MLB Network and their absolutely insane list.
Oh gosh.
Their enragement farming that they've been doing. Yeah. But it's at least fodder for a lot of really good jokes. So, and that's what I'm good for.
Yeah. And then you can follow me at Jake Crumpler. I don't have it here, but that's how you spell it. It's just one word. And as Adam said at the beginning of the panel, doing work all over the place, Baseball HQ. I got my personal podcast over on the Athletes Hub, and then all the work that I do at Pitcher List, including the In the Pen podcast and the articles that I post, including one that came out this morning. 4 pitchers that had hot second halves that deserve your attention. Go check it out. Where's Adam?
He's not here anymore.
Yes, Nick. It's Nick.
Oh, it's Nick.
Yay!